Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. My name is Stephen Trainer, and I'm going to be taking you through the webinar this morning. We're going to spend about 1 hour talking about moon planning, so planning your photographs of the moon. And we're going to be using Photo Ephemeris Web, which is the web app. Where, you can find that at app.photoephemeris.com. So hopefully most of you have used that before and have explored some of the features. The goal of today really is to take you through pretty much everything that's included about the moon within the app, and explain what some of the information is for, why you would want to know about it, and how you might apply it in planning your photography. This webinar is really, we're going to cover a lot of material. We're going to start with basics, and we're going to push on through as much as we can to get to some of the more advanced topics. If you've joined some previous webinars, then for sure you'll have seen some of this material before, but I'm putting it together in a way that's really focused on sort of top to tail moonshot planning. So with that, let's jump into the agenda for today. The goals for today really are that you walk away with an understanding of the lunar cycle and how you can get the timings of the lunar cycle and key events from the web app. And I'd also like, as we go through some of those events that occur in the lunar cycle, to just give you a few rules of thumb. These are things that if you've been doing moon photography for a while, you probably pick these up and you know them. And if you're fairly new to it and you don't know them, they can be very helpful in simplifying how you think about what are the plans you'd like to focus your time on making. So we'll cover some of the rules of thumb. We'll talk a little bit about supermoons and eclipses, both of which are coming up in the next 2 to 3 months. So we'll cover those a little bit. And then we'll talk about maybe 2 or 3 different scenarios. There are a few different situations where, in terms of how you might do some of the planning, you might be saying, look, I enjoy photographing. It's something I like to do regularly. So I'd like to go out in the next week or the next 2 weeks. What could I get? What could I shoot this month? So you know what your time period is, but you want to identify what are the opportunities that you could explore. And then you may have a situation where you're saying, well, I know my local area, or I know this area that I like to travel to, and I have in my mind a particular shot, which may include the moon, and it's a specific view of the moon. It is a particular part of the sky, or it's behind a particular object or building or summit, whatever it might be. And you want to know when could you get that shot. So those are sort of two different approaches to planning. So we'll talk a little bit about each of those. So that's the agenda. Let's just look at a couple of sort of moonshots to set the scene. We're going to talk about the phases of the moon. Everybody's probably familiar with new moon. This is what we're looking at here, this tiny crescent moon in an evening sky. And you're also, I'm sure, familiar with full moon, which we'll come to. And then there are all the bits in between. So the first quarter and the last quarter. And that's as the moon progresses through its monthly cycle. And this shot is, I think, a waxing gibbous moon. It's sort of obscured by some cloud a little bit, but you can see that it's throwing lots of light on the landscape. So there are a whole variety of different shots you can take. This one, wonderful shot by Fred Greco, which you'll find illustrates the tutorial for some of the topics we'll talk about today. And this is a full moon rising behind the Chrysler Building in Manhattan. So that's full moon. This is an eclipsed moon. A totally eclipsed moon is always a full moon by definition, because the moon is lying in the Earth's shadow, and so it's at that time of month when the moon is full. And this one Alice took a few years ago down in Denver. This is it next to the state capitol building. This is a sequence of lunar eclipse shots where you can see the moment of greatest eclipse. This was back in 2015, and you can see it brightening as we're sort of just coming into totality and then coming out of totality. Obviously, this is a composite shot. There aren't 5 moons, but we'll talk about all these different phases and events and where you can find them within the app. So this is a handy little diagram. It's from Wikipedia. Wikipedia is a fabulous resource for learning about all sorts of these things. This is from the article on the lunar cycle, and it covers the new moon, the waxing crescent. So the instant of new moon is the start of the lunar cycle. From that point on, the moon is waxing, i.e. growing. A greater proportion of the disk is illuminated until we reach full moon. We've gone through first quarter, so this is the waxing phase. It's a crescent until it's at the first quarter, then it's half illuminated. Then it's what's called gibbous, so more than half illuminated. And then it's full, and then it goes through the reverse and it's waning. We hit the last quarter, and then we have the old moon, which is what you see in just the days before, hours before the instant of new moon. So this diagram, it shows you sort of how that works. Here's the sun shining from the top, and you get the sense that the full moon, for example, here corresponds with when the moon is essentially the opposite side of the Earth from the sun, but not in the Earth's shadow. If it were in the Earth's shadow, that would be a total lunar eclipse, which is why those total lunar eclipses occur at the times of full moon, but only in certain geometries, and therefore on a somewhat irregular cycle. So have a look at that if you'd like to explore this in a little bit more detail. One other thing, which I think is hinted at, I think it's intentional, I'm not sure, but you might notice, you see this little orbit of the moon around the Earth. See how it's not quite regular. You see that appears to be closer to the Earth here than it is here. And that if that is indeed intentional, which I suspect it is, that reflects a true aspect of the moon's cycle, which is that the moon is closer at some point in the cycle and farther away from Earth at another point in the cycle. And we'll talk about those events too. Those are called perigee when it's closest and apogee when it's farthest away. So with that, I'm going to jump over into Photo Ephemeris, and we will look at some specific opportunities that are coming up. So let's jump in. Well, let's talk first about something that's relatively new that maybe you haven't seen. We've always had these buttons here that allow you to set the date. So I have the date set to today, March the 12th. And if I click back, it's clicking back through events. So I clicked back twice and it's gone back to March the 10th and set the time to 3:45 in the morning. Here's the map pin here in Boulder, Colorado, which is where we're based. And we're at the first quarter moon, which is in a moment in time, and it's at 3:45 in the morning. If I click forward, the next event it says is apogee. So apogee is when the moon is farthest from the Earth in the cycle. So clicking between events is great, but we've now got a list which shows you what's going on. It's a little bit easier to get a sense of chronologically how these things are happening. Most of these events, the vast majority of them, with a couple of exceptions, pertain to the moon. So this is very much relevant if you're looking for a calendar of key lunar events. And you access it, you can click outside it to dismiss it. You click this little button here to the right of the date controls. It brings up the event. It scrolls to the nearest one. And you can see here it's scrolled to, we're in March 2022, and Friday the 18th at 1:17 a.m. That's in local time here in Colorado, so that's mountain time. And it's a full moon. So if I click that and click select, that will set the time and date of the app to the moment of that event. And then you can see that indeed it appears here down in the timeline at the lower left. And it also is marked here in the legend for the chart. As I scroll, we move away from the moment of full moon, but as I get back to it, there we are, full moon again. One thing that relates to, let's go back here and look at the previous event. So you see these percentages here where it says disk plus 0.61%. So there are a couple of percentages that you might see in the app, and this one is showing you the relative size of the moon relative to when the moon is at its smallest. So if you remember back to your mathematics classes or trigonometry at school, and the teacher might have said something like, this arc subtends an angle of 5 degrees, and you go, oh, what is all this terrible language, subtends and so forth. Basically, all it means is it's the angle that it appears. So if you were looking at the moon and you just opened your hands out to sort of match the sides, the angle between the palms of your hand, if you extended it, would be the angle subtended or occupied by the width of the moon as you were viewing it from here on Earth. And typically that angle is about ½ a degree. So one of the rules of thumb that it's good to know about is a moon is about ½ a degree, but it varies, and it varies between the apogee, which I mentioned is that moment in the lunar cycle when the moon is farthest from Earth, to perigee, which you see occurs a couple of weeks later. So we got 10th of March, apogee, 23rd of March, perigee, and then perigee is when the moon is closest to Earth. And these percentages say how much bigger it appears, and it's just in percentage terms. So you don't have to look at fiddly, numbers like 0.526 of a degree. But it's saying that from apogee to perigee, the moon is about 10% bigger, and that's the full angular diameter. So when we talk about full moons, this full moon happens roughly halfway between apogee and perigee, and it says the disk is about 7% larger than when the smallest moon that you'd ever see. So that's an average sized full moon. Now, let's just look ahead a little bit in the year. I'm going to skip past these eclipse things here. We'll come back to that. Let's look through to June, and then you can see the full moon. Look at that, 13.72% larger than the smallest moon. And it's roughly 12 hours different from the time of perigee. So this is what's called a supermoon. So if you hear people saying, I'm going to shoot the supermoon, generally they mean two things. They mean it's a full moon, and that's just by convention because those are things that are photographically attractive to go and shoot. And it's a full moon that happens to occur near to the time of perigee when the moon is closest to Earth. So that's what these disk percentages here in the events list are telling you. So anything roughly above 12, 13%, supermoon. And there's 2 or 3 of those usually each year. So you'll see also in July, it's even marginally bigger again, 14%. And you think, well, 14%, does it matter? And the answer is, just because it isn't a supermoon doesn't mean you shouldn't go and photograph it. Of course you should go and photograph it. You can overcome these differences in size with your choice of shot, your lens selection, how distant you are from, say, a building and then the moon next to it. All of those things can give an illusion of greater size. That said, if you say you have a lens of a certain fixed length, when the moon is closer, you will pick up more pixels on your camera sensor when it's a supermoon than you will when it's, let's say, a mini moon. So, a full moon that happens to be near near apogee, which was probably something back in January, for example. There we go. There's 3 days away from apogee, and you see the full moon's only 1.4%. So that's a little bit on these disk percentages that you see here. Let me just check in on some questions, some good practical questions here. So Andrea asks, how can I save my home position in the web application? You put the red pin where you want it. So let's say I wanted it to be in the middle of that reservoir up there. I would go settings, and where it says default location, you say use primary pin, and then it saves that. Every time you then open the app, even if you're in incognito mode, which Andrew is your situation, it will restore that because this setting is saved up to your user profile in the server. So that's how you can set the default location. Generally, using the web app in incognito mode, you'll end up having to reset a few things every time. But it's fine to do that if that's your preference. Mark asks, can the app be set for the user's local time? Not really, because what it does is it picks up the time zone automatically based on where the pin is. So this is a planning app. So the time zone up here, it says America, Denver, 6 hours before GMT, Mountain Daylight Time. If I pick that up, drag it over here towards Chicago, it picks up that now this red pin is in Chicago, and so it's on Central Daylight Time. You can override this. You can set a manual time zone in the iOS app, but not on the web app at present. I don't know how useful that would be. If you think it would be, Mark, let me know, just so I can understand the use case better. David asks, does PhotoFramer's web account for daylight saving time? Yes, it does. So that's relevant to this weekend. So let's go back to Boulder, just to get myself somewhere familiar. Zoom in. So as you're probably aware, the clocks go forward here in the US this weekend. So let's do that. I'm going to go to today, and you see that it says it's 7 hours before GMT Mountain Standard Time. I go tomorrow, and it changes. It's 6 hours before Mountain Daylight Time. So that will be accounted for automatically. And that's using the standard time zone database to do that. Secondly, does it use the system time settings? It only uses the system time settings for formatting the appearance of the time. And that's in settings. You can do time format. You can use default. If you say default, it will use the operating system default to format the time. But it doesn't use it for the time zone. The time zone depends on where you drop the red pin. This is an interesting question. So is this percentage, the percentage being this disk percentage, I'm thinking that I was talking about, valid only for that month, only compared with the apogee for a certain month? Very good question. It's compared with the extreme case of apogee. So in the code, I have a value for the distance of the moon from the Earth that is the extreme for this era, shall we say, so within the nearest 1,000 years or thereabouts. And the perigee is the closest within that period. And this percentage is relative to that most distant apogee. So it's not for the one lunar cycle, it's for sort of all lunar cycles that we're going to care about within a few hundred years of our lifetime. So let's carry on with some more moon stuff. We're going to go over to England. We're going to go to Northumberland in the northeast of the UK. This is just as an example. Northeast of the UK, there we are, there's England. This is where I was brought up in Newcastle upon Tyne. And to the north of there is the county of Northumberland. And we've gone to this place called Lindisfarne, or it's called the Holy Island of Lindisfarne. It's where Bede, not Cuthbert, one of the two, used to hang out. And there was a priory there and a castle and all sorts of nice photogenic things. So I thought we'd come here and have a look. We'll go back to today, and let's just talk about this issue of, I'd like to go photographing. What can I view? First of all, let's just see what we've got going on today. So we are at 5:55. Let's go back. So the sun is just about set here. I'm just adjusting the timeline. There we are. So we're 5:40. The sun is setting off here to the west. If we were looking to photograph the moon, what would that be like today? Or right now, or roughly now, the moon at this point in time is off to the southeast, and it's relatively high in the sky. It's 50.6 degrees. That's quite a long way up. So if you were photographing up, you're leaning a long way back. Typically, when you're photographing something, you probably want to juxtapose the moon against the landscape or against a building. Those are typically having an isolated moon in the sky doesn't tell you too much photographically. So when you see the moon anything above really 20 degrees, the only time you're really going to be able to photograph that and juxtapose it with an object is if you're close to a mountain and looking up to a summit, or close to a tall building and looking up at a tall building. So 50 degrees is a long way up. If you wanted to photograph the like that lunar eclipse shot I showed you before, that was when the moon was high in the sky. But all I did was put a telephoto lens on the moon and take that. So that it's okay for that, but this isn't great for a scenic photograph, a landscape, or a cityscape. So what are the options here? Well, let's look at the events again. Let's look at this upcoming full moon. So the full moon is on Friday the 18th, so we'll go there. And the full moon, we're in England now, so the time zone has changed. You remember here in Colorado, the instant full moon was 1:17 in the morning. Here it's 7:17 in the morning. Something to bear in mind, it doesn't matter exactly when full moon happens. It doesn't matter. What matters is the hours around that. Typically, the hours before and after. And let's talk about why that might be. So on this day, Friday, is it Friday? Yeah, Friday the 18th. The sun sets at 6:16. So here's the sun setting off to the west. The moon is not yet risen. You can see that moonrise occurs 18 minutes later. If we go to the instant of moonrise, a couple of interesting things to note. One is that this view here, we're on a beach, and this has a view off to the east. Often a view to the east or the west is good for moon planning because that gives you options for catching the moon or the sun indeed close to the horizon, which means that you get better possibilities for compositions. This Lindisfarne Castle, I'll show you a picture of it just so you get a sense of the view. This is the castle here. You can just about see that. This is it. So this is looking along the beach. Here's Lindisfarne Castle. We're looking more or less due east. This is a photograph of the moon, or the sun rising, I guess, because that's east. And you can see here, look, this looks quite promising. There's moonrise. So if I click on moonrise and then drag the time slider forward, look at that. The moon's rising right behind the castle. We don't know exactly whether if it's above the castle or below the castle. We'll come back to that and explore that one a little bit later on. But that's interesting. We do have a moonrise coming up right behind Lindisfarne Castle at the end of next week. However, it's quite a while after, it's a good half an hour after sunset. So one of the things in thinking about your moon planning is how much contrast how much light do you need in the shot? How much light do you need in the sky? How much light do you need on your subject? And you'll probably find that Lindisfarne Castle isn't particularly well illuminated. From memory, it's been a little while since I was there. But at this point, the sun is half an hour after sunset, so the sky is pretty dark. The moon is only just above the horizon. The sun is 5 degrees, 4.5 degrees below the horizon. It may be a little bit too contrasty. The sky could be too dark. There won't be much light on the castle. The moon will be brightish. So that mightn't be ideal. And this is one of the rules of thumb, if you're familiar with moon photography, is that often if you know when full moon is, and you're looking to shoot the full moon rising, two things to know. One, it's going to be somewhere in the east. It could be northeast, it could be southeast, it could be directly east, or more or less directly east as it is here. It's going to vary, and that's one of the reasons you need to use a planning tool to work it out, because it's not something you can predict intuitively. But it is going to be to the east. And secondly, it's going to be around the time of sunset. It could be before, it could be after. That also varies. But one rule of thumb is to come and look at the day before. So the day before, what has happened? Well, sunset has hardly changed. It's more or less the same direction. It's a couple of minutes earlier. But look at moonrise. The moon now is rising earlier at 5 o'clock rather than 6 o'clock. And if I come to the moment of sunset, um, and I hadn't looked at this before. It's actually, it's funnily enough, it's directly behind the castle from the spot I happened to pick on the beach. And it's 8 degrees in the sky. So it's high-ish, but it's not impossibly high. And the sun is just setting. So what that means is that you've probably got good light in the sky. You've got some margin of error to, in terms of time, you can have the moon just off to the left of the castle. You could go later, it could get a little bit darker into twilight, and you could have the moon off to the right of the castle. So this is how you would explore this, the basics of what could I shoot in the next couple of weeks. You look at the events, you say, well, I'm interested in a full moon. You come to the moment of full moon, you check where the moon's rising, you check the timing relative to sunset in particular for a full moon rise, and then check the day before. That's always a good thing to do. You'll often find that the day before full moon will give you a better timing for when the moon rises relative to when the sun sets, in order to get a nice shot with manageable contrast, light on the subject, light in the sky, or the belt of Venus, which is the Earth's shadow that you can see occurring just in the right time and in the right direction. So let me pause there, look at a couple of questions. Yeah, excellent question. So Jerry says, I tried to get a full moon at the south rim of the Grand Canyon, but have had no success. Is it possible, or maybe only from the north rim? Well, it's going to vary quite a bit, Jerry, and the geography of both the north and the south rim they're both very, very varied, depending on where you position yourself and where you orient your camera. You've got a wide range of possibilities for direction, but bear in mind that to get the moon lowish on the horizon, you either need to be shooting broadly west-ish or broadly east-ish, with a certain amount of variation. And so it could be that if you were trying to shoot directly north from the south rim, you're never going to see the moon there. It doesn't go in that direction. And equally from the north rim, shooting directly south, you would see the moon, but it's going to be very high in the sky, because when you shoot directly south, for us in the northern hemisphere, that is when the moon typically reaches its culmination or highest elevation angle above the horizon. So we may come back to that one. I'll see if we can find some examples. Charlene asks, good question, Charlene. What is the difference between the color of the gray lines? I'm guessing, Charlene, you mean the blue lines. At least I see them as blue. This one here is moonrise. So this is the moon and the sun rise broadly to the east, and this is moonset here. You can see there's a correlation between the color of this line here and the color in the timeline. So where it says moonset and it has dark blue above it, that's the sort of the color legend that tells you that's moonset. Similarly here for moonrise. And similarly here for sunrise, that's the yellowish one there, and orange sunset. As I move the time slider, these other lines that you see appearing, I'll just talk about this one here. This one is the position or the direction to the moon at this time of 5:30 a.m. And there's a similar one for the sun. So if I just drag forward a little bit, there's the sun there at 7:43 a.m. There are a few other ones. There is a help article about this. Maybe I can remember how to find it. Azimuth lines. What do the colored lines mean? And this gives you a picture of, and explains what they all are. So if you have questions on some of the features, try out this help feature. Type in best guess colored lines, for example, and that'll come up. Uses a US spelling rather than UK. I don't know if the UK one will actually work. Let's find out, shall we? I'm a little bit, oh yeah, it's there. It comes up in a different order, but it's there. So let's press on. I'm going to come back to some of these other questions in a while. Gosh, lots of questions. So we've got, let's talk very quickly about new moon. New moon's a little bit of a different beast. New moon, Friday the 1st of April. Another rule of thumb. So here we are. The instant of new moon happens to be at 7:24 in the morning. We don't particularly care that it's 7:24 in the morning, but it's good to know, am I before new moon or after new moon? Because that tells you the phase that you're in. And for some people, that has a lot of cultural significance. So there's a lot of cultural significance around first observations of a new crescent moon. There are a lot of calendar systems and religious feasts, holiday feasts, cultural things that depend on the timing of observations of new moon. So that's important to know. What you'll see here is that another rule of thumb for you, for a new moon, if you're going to see the new moon, chances are you're not going to be able to see it on the day of the event itself because it's just too tiny in the sky. And the app gives you some clues around that. So for the days between new moon and first quarter, you'll see in the timeline here that you get these extra crescent moon events. And this is to do with crescent moon visibility. So can I see the crescent moon? And you see this little sort of eye crossed out. That basically means, no, you're not going to see it. And indeed, this symbol F down here is a code, the letters A through F that tell you whether you can see it or not, or whether you're likely to be able to see it or not. So let me just show you how to find the details about that. This is, I think this will find it, yeah. So there's a gentleman in the UK, an astronomer called Bernard Yallop, who came up with this classification for these new moon events. And these are documented here. So lunar and other events, you'll find all about these things here. And this is what these crescent moon visibility things are. So when it says F, it means you're not going to see it. Even if you had binoculars or a telescope, you wouldn't see it. You need to reliably see a new moon. What you're looking for in these crescent moon things is this crescent icon or an A-B rating. So if we skip forward, I'm going to go, there we are, this time. I'm going to skip forward to the following day. So if you want to photograph a new moon, rule of thumb is it's going to be in the evening after sunset, and you're going to be looking to the west, roughly. If you want to know exactly where it is, use the app and it'll find out for you. It'll tell you exactly where it is. So here we are. That's new moon. We can't see it on the day of new moon, but the day afterwards, we can see it. It gets an A rating, so it should be perfectly visible. And in the legend here, it's showing you that this 2.43% is the illuminated fraction of the moon's disk. So if a full moon is 100% and a new moon is 0%, by 8:30 the day after new moon in April, in this location, and it varies by your geography and location quite significantly, you would see the moon was about 2.43% illuminated. So it's still a very small fraction. And you will see it. And this 8:30 is what's predicted to be the time when it's easiest to see this crescent moon. And these calculations are done based on the difference between sunset time and moonset time, and how dark the sky is getting versus how low in the sky the moon will be. So this is giving you the best viewing time. There's a little tooltip there. It's a little obscured by my giant pink mouse pointer, but it says best viewing time. So that's a little bit on how to photograph plan crescent moon shots. Okay, so we've covered the new moon piece, and yeah, so then let's talk quickly about eclipses. So we've talked new moons, full moons, perigee moons, apogee moons. The quarter moons are the half illuminated ones, which is good if you're taking a telephoto shot just of the moon and you're looking to pick out the relief of the craters and so forth, features on the surface of the moon. quarter moons are good times to do that because you get a lot of side lighting of the surface of the moon. So for long telephoto shots, that's a good place to go. Let's talk about eclipses. So these eclipse times, if you have the Pro subscription for the web app, you'll see these times given. I'm using the Pro version here today, and you see there's a whole sequence on the 16th of May of this year. There is an eclipse, and the events are listed here in the events window. So let's go to the first one, penumbral eclipse. And you'll also see them here in the timeline. And you can see that they come in sequence chronologically from left to right along this timeline. Penumbral eclipse is basically when the moon enters the half shadow of the Earth. It's hard to tell that it's happened. It looks just a little bit dimmer, but you can get the timing, the direction of that here. And you can see that here in England, this is happening in the middle of the night, 2:30 in the morning, with the moon about 12 degrees above the horizon in this direction, sort of south-southwest. A partial eclipse you'll definitely start seeing, because that's when you see the bite taken out of the surface of the moon. It sort of looks like a crescent, but it isn't a crescent. It's actually the Earth's shadow rather than the relative position of the sun and the moon that's causing that effect. And again, we can still see the moon is above the horizon. You see it's moved slightly further to the west and it's lower in the sky. And here's the total eclipse starting at 4:28 a.m. So things to know about eclipse planning and moons is this one is going to be a challenge. Why do I say that? Well, it's after the start of civil twilight. In the north of England, we're 55, 56 degrees north. Twilight lasts a long time. You can see it's 50 minutes. And twilight is when the civil twilight, the sun is 6 degrees below the horizon. It's rising towards sunrise at 0. And that's going to take 50 minutes. And the total eclipse doesn't start until halfway through civil twilight. So the skies are already somewhat bright. And also the moon at the time the eclipse starts is only 2.5 degrees above the horizon, which means if there's any cloud, any haze, or indeed there could be obstacles on the horizon here as well with hills, it's going to be pretty hard to see that. So if I come back to, let's come to another webinar location that I saved to webinar. Oh no, that's search. I need to put it in my locations here. Yeah, I'm going to come to this little spot. This is back in Colorado. And the timings are all very different. So we're at the time of total eclipse, at the start of total eclipse, things are looking a bit better here. The sun is well down, 13 degrees below the horizon. The moon is well up, 12 degrees above the horizon, but not so far up that you can't juxtapose it against something interesting. So that's timing-wise, that's a lot better. So just in the interest of time, we've got 15 minutes left. There's a bunch more on eclipses and so forth there. There is a video that you can find on our video channel, which is it's probably linked through from the tutorials, but there's a whole video showing you how to do lunar eclipse planning as well if you're interested in more about that. So let me delve into some questions, and then we'll come into the last section, which is around, we've looked at exploring what can I get in the coming days and weeks. We'll talk about when can I get a particular alignment of the moon as the final section of the talk. Loch asks, are the moon angle degrees based on the center of the moon? Excellent question. Or the top or the bottom? They are based on the center, always on the center. So if you're looking at this altitude here of minus 2.48 degrees, that is the center of the moon. If you wanted to get a sense of where the bottom of the moon was, you can do the sums in your head. I guess you'll be 0.25 degrees lower or higher for the upper or lower limb, as they're called, for the top and bottom edge of the moon. Joseph asks, interesting question, is there a different minimum millimeter lens, i.e. focal length, that you would use for full moon photos as compared to crescent moons? I think generally speaking, there's no particular reason why it would have to be different. You could have a large, long telephoto shot of a crescent moon just as easily as you could of a full moon. I think it really depends on what you're trying to show in the photograph. Typically, you would take a wide-angle shot for a landscape with the moon positioned somewhere nice, composed somewhere nicely, sort of rule of thirds, top right type thing. That's going to be a shorter lens. And then for the cityscape shots, like Fred's shot that I showed earlier with the large full moon rising behind the building, it's going to be a telephoto lens to get that. Talk about why that will be, hopefully, in the last few minutes of the talk. Kevin asks, are the degrees of direction true or magnetic north? They are true north, and if you have the free version of the app, true north is all you can see. If you've got the pro version, you can toggle things over to magnetic north. The only reason you would ever want that is if you are using a magnetic field compass and you don't have that compass adjusted with its own correction for magnetic declination. A lot of compasses, you say, well, I know the magnetic declination in this location is, like here in Berlin, 4.63 degrees. That's what this little number is up here. And typically you can set that on a compass. If you're not setting that on the compass, then you would want the azimuths, i.e. the bearings of the moon. For example, here the moon is setting at 232.59 degrees. Because I have this enabled, that is relative to magnetic north. So if I take it off, it's 237.21 degrees relative to true north. 99.9% of you will want true north. It's very, very few people, I think, would ever need magnetic north, but it's there in the pro version if you need it. Okay, let me press on here. Scott asks, I look for full moon rising or setting events when the sun is between 0.5 to plus a half to -6 degrees relative to the horizon. So there's enough sunlight to illuminate the landscape and have an exposure value similar to the moon. So that's this question around contrast and lighting of your foreground and your subject. Is there a simple way to list those events without manually searching? There is a way to list those events without manually searching. Whether you call it a simple way, I don't know, but I'll show you what it is. We'll do that. Let's do that now. And this is great. Okay, so I'm going to do, Scott, your question, and Evelyn, your question. How does one know when the mountains will be in the way? Both excellent questions. And to do this, we're going to use an example here in Colorado. We're going to look at Longs Peak. Longs Peak is a tall mountain in the Rockies, about 40-50 miles from here. And a couple of things. I'm going to use this geodetics tool. Geodetics, you click this button here and it gives you an extra map pin. And the map pin, think of it as a measuring tool. It's a simple point-to-point measuring tool. If I drag it to the roadside here, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to swap the pins over using this swap pin button. And you'll see some additional information pops up below the map. It tells you, because we're in the US, I'm going to switch to English imperial units. So it tells you a few things. One, from red pin to gray pin. The gray pin's on summit of Longs Peak. That's the mountain. We're down on the roadside here where we can pull over easily, step out of our car with our tripod and take a photograph of this mountain. Question is, can we get the moon behind the top of the mountain? That's what we'll talk about now. This tool tells you the distance. It's 4 miles from red to gray pin. The direction is 250 degrees. There's a difference of nearly 5,000 feet. So the top of the mountain is 5,000 feet higher. And the angle of elevation from red to gray pin is about 13 degrees. So you're looking up. So that's one thing you can do. So for example, I just happened to be at 9:10 here in May. This is the evening of the total eclipse. Um, and Evelyn, to answer your question, the moon is way over here at this point, so it's not really ever going to be seen over the mountain. But let's flick forward. I'm just flicking forward a few events here. Let's go. Okay. Let's go to there. So here's a situation. We're in May, later in May. The moon is setting way up to the north. I'm actually going to go to first quarter. That's better. That's a better one. Here's the moon rising. Okay. And I'm just manually adjusting the time slider, and I'm manually lining the position of the moon, that's this blue line here, with the direction from the red pin to the gray pin. And the question is the mountain in the way? The answer is no. How do I know that? I know that the angle from the red pin to the gray pin is 13 degrees, but I can see from the slider here that the moon is at 30 degrees above the horizon, so it's way higher in the sky. So the mountain is not in the way. That's one way to do it. The next question, which comes back to Andrea's question, we'll look at that now. I'm going to come over to this other page called the sphere. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to put a little bit of light on. This is to get this 3D terrain, you need the paid subscription. But this is a very simple way to visualize whether where the moon is in the sky. Let's make it bigger so you can see it a bit more easily. This is artificially enlarged in this moon, but you can see there's the red pin down by the roadside. There's the top of the mountain with the gray pin on top of it, and you can see that the moon is way higher in the sky. So you don't have to compare the numbers. You don't have to compare 13 degrees with 30 degrees and think it through in your head, even though it's pretty simple to do that. You can just visually see that the moon is higher in the sky. So that's the sphere page. I think, Andrea, that's hopefully what you were asking about. So we've got 5 minutes left. We're going to get through this. It's going to be tight, but we will get through it. So now let's get back to Scott's question around getting the moon in a particular position at for a particular elevation of the sun. So this is getting the lighting conditions right for a moonrise shot. Or moonset. So we'll do moonset. I'm going to use this tool called Visual Search. Now, with the free version of the app, you can use this for the sun. So you can use it to learn and explore and see if it's something you would find useful. If you'd like to use it for the moon or for the galactic center of the Milky Way, you'll need to upgrade to the paid version. But let's use this. What does Visual Search do? It will tell you the times and the dates when you can find the sun, the moon, or the galactic center in a specific area of the sky. So when we talked about this question of when can I get this particular shot, this is the tool you would use. And Scott, to your question, this is how you can find when the moon is in the right place with particular lighting conditions. So let's look at how that would work. I'm going to say I want to find the moon. I'm going to align it to the center of the moon's disk. You can align it to the lower limb or the upper limb. I'll talk about why you would do that maybe shortly. Let's search for 2 years. And I'm going to use a very shorthand trick. What we're doing is we're setting a target to say, this is the area of the sky that I want to find the moon in, or dates when the moon will be there. And I'm just going to click Use Geodetics. And what that does, it says use the position of the gray pin from the red pin to set these altitude and azimuth parameters. So altitude is how high above the horizon it is. Azimuth is the bearing from left to right, etc. So that sets this target area. There you can see it, it's a square area. And now all I have to do is click search. And we've got 103 results for the next couple of years. I'm going to pick one relatively at random, June 20th. If I click on it, let's make the moon a more sensible size just so you can get a sense of it. Here I'm going to look back from the moon to the red pin, and you can see that it's found a time when the moon is passing through this area of the sky. And if I move the slider, there's the path of the moon. Let's look at it from the sort of photographer's perspective again, and you can get a sense of when that is. So we've got something in the right part of the sky, but it doesn't answer Scott's question, which is, I only want this in a more or less a twilight sky, or when the sun is just about to set. So how can we filter these results down to ones that are just with those correct lighting conditions? Well, two things. We can go to the filters tab. I have a shortcut here which says give me results which are near sunrise or sunset. So I click that, and what it does, it says that's a shorthand for this more specific instruction, which is to say only show me the results when the sun is between this particular altitude. So to use Scott's criteria, I'm going to say I want it -6 to 0.5, and I'm going to apply that. I apply the filter, and now you see there are only 12 results out of 103. So let's look at some of those. And the 30th of August, I have a 37-minute window, because it's quite a large part of the sky here that we've said. We could tighten up that search quite easily. But that is happening when at the middle of that time, the sun is at -8 degrees, but it's still showing because there's at least some point when the sun is within our filtered criteria. So at the start of this time span, from 7:58, the sun is only 4.8 degrees below the horizon, so it's still twilight, and the moon is in our target area. So that's how you can do the filtering, Scott, to get the times you want. It's tied in with this visual search tool. So you would say, I want a full moon or a moon in this part of the sky, and I want it only when the sun's there. Let's see if there are actually any full moons as well. There's a full moon shortcut which sets the illuminated fraction. Apply that, and we've got 4 full moons that fulfill that criteria. So 9th of March 2023. There you go. There's a full moon above and to the right of the top of Long's Peak, with the sun 3.6 degrees below the horizon. Okay, I see we are at time. I'm happy to push on because I see there are a load of questions. If you need to drop off, of course, I understand. We will do a recording and put this out probably in the next few days. But I'm going to press on for another 10 minutes or so, see if I can get through some more of these questions. Lots of good questions today, so thank you for all of those. Jules asks, sometimes I photograph the moon or the sun coming up over a particular rock. I don't know if the time TP list at rise or set time indicates the time it rises over the rock. No, it does not, because see if I've got that. Sunrise is wrong. Okay, there's an article on that, so I'll show you that one quickly. These diagrams basically explain why that is, Jules. Sunrise, moonrise, all these things have very specific times and its definitions rather, and they're the definitions relative to the unobstructed horizon. So that's not sunrise, the sun popping over the top of a mountain, nor popping over the top of a building. It's when it pops over the unobstructed horizon. So those are the times that you'll see in the app. If you want to find out the time when the moon appears over an obstacle, the simple way to do it is to use this geodetics tool. Get your viewpoint, measure the elevation angle. So I put the 2 pins in the right place, check the altitude, and then you know that the sun or the moon has to be at least above 12.7 degrees for it to be visible above that obstacle. Or you can use a visual search and give it a target altitude. You can use either a range, or you can uncheck that and just use a very particular target and say, I want it right there. And that's another way of getting that sort of information. Is there, Stefan asks, is there ever a full moon in the north of 51 degrees north, 114 west in the evening? You don't get full moons to the north. Let's just have a little look at that. So I'm going to go, let's put that in 51.047, what was that? Can't type, 0477, comma, minus 114.06, that'll do. So we'll go roughly to the right spot. So we're in Calgary. And if I just flick through the events, watch the moonrise and the moonset lines, and you'll see that they do vary. There it goes way to the north at the end of May. So it varies quite a lot, but what you'll never find is, as you drag the time slider along, the moon always transits. It rises to the east, it transits to the south and sets to the west, as viewed from a northern hemisphere location. If you're down in Sydney or Auckland or something like that, it's all different. It transits to the north. So broadly speaking, you won't see moons to your north if you're in the northern hemisphere. That's that. Sue asks, are phone compasses true or magnetic north? Typically, I think they're going to show you true north, Sue. If particular apps may have an option to display magnetic north as well. But they do what they're magnetic. They use magnetometers to get the reading, so they get the reading relative to magnetic north. But then what they do is they work out the location of the phone and they apply the correction to it that this app uses. There's a mathematical model that tells you what the offset's likely to be in the coming 5-year period. So it's going to give you true north, normally speaking. Is the full moon the time it rises? Michael asks, and he's given me a link here. So let me have a look at this link. I'll paste that in. This is good. It's the first time somebody sent me a link in a Zoom webinar chat. So thank you for that. That's cool. Is full moon the time it rises? No. Let me zoom out in California here. If you watch, full moon is at 12:17 a.m. This is in Pacific Daylight Time. Moonrise is at 7:45. Now I'm going to come up to Santa Rosa. Full moon is still at 12:17 a.m. It doesn't depend on your location. Moonrise is now later at 8:03 p.m. So they vary independently. Jerry asks, the new iPhone has a magnetic back to hold the battery. Will it affect the app when used to predict the moon location? That would potentially apply to the augmented reality feature. So that's when you look through the camera and it overlays the position of the moon. If it's built into the phone itself, then Apple, I assume, will have dealt with that in their hardware design and implementation. If you have a magnetic case, however, I've seen those things throw the phone magnets off badly, and that could definitely affect the calibration of the augmented reality. Evelyn asks, is Visual Search a pro feature? No, you can use Visual Search in the free version, but you'll only be able to select the sun. If you want to get the moon or the galactic center, then that needs the pro version. So look, is an online tutorial? Yes, Barbara's question. Let me show you where those are. So if you want tutorials, go to tutorials. That's that link to the top right. I just opened that here. And then there is a whole series of tutorials. And if I go to part 7 in the celestial sphere, this one is a written tutorial. There are a couple. Let's have a look here. Let's have a look. With videos, yeah. So here's part 1 has got a video. And if you click through to our Krupnik Apps, that's our company name, to our video site, it's on vimeo.com, and you go to showcases, look at the Learning TP web app showcase, and here you will see there is a webinar that I did back in December that covers the 3D sphere. So maybe I'll see if I can put, oh, that's me talking to myself. Be silent. Right, okay. Harvey asks, gosh, so many questions today, this is great. Are there differences between the web app and the phone app, or when would I use the web app instead of the phone app? Well, yes, Harvey, there are a few differences, but most of the concepts are the same. So all the things you've learned about the moon, some of the things you learned about using visual search, about using the timeline and the map and the azimuth lines, they're all identical. When would you use one versus the other? Basically, the way I would think of it is, if I'm at home and I have my laptop or my desktop available, I'll use the web app. If I'm out and about in the field or on a trip and I don't have my computer, I'll use the iPhone app or the iPad. That's probably the best way to think about it. Thomas asks, tutorials for learning the program with an iPad? Yes, there are. So there's a whole bunch of those, again, up on mostly Vimeo. There's a whole other showcase learning TP for iOS, and there's a lot of videos there for that. So you'll find these linked through from our website. If you go to photoephemeris.com, support video tutorials, then you'll find a link to them all from there. So photoephemeris.com support. That's that. Let's do, there's still a whole bunch of you here, so if you're interested, I'm going to do one more very quick thing. I'm going to come back to Boulder. This is the last thing I was hoping to cover today. This is the most egregious overrun we've had on a webinar, but I think it's because we had a lot of people on today and a lot of good questions, so it's always happy to answer those. So here we are in Boulder. I'm going to show you a fictitious scenario about getting the moon above a building. We're going to combine a whole bunch of tools. I'm putting the geodetics tool on and putting the gray pin on top of this thing, Mansonitis. Imagine that, horror of horrors, Boulder City Council approves a large radio antenna to be built on top of Mansonitis. There isn't one. I'm making this up. There's not going to be one. But imagine there were. And you said, you thought, I would love to get a photograph of the full moon on top of this notional radio antenna, which they're going to build there. And they're going to build this radio antenna to be 250 feet high. So I'm going to set in a 250-foot elevation offset there. So I've put that in. What that does, it changes the geodetics calculation to account for a building or a structure that is 250 feet high. If I then come to the sphere, let's go to the sphere, and then I'm going to zoom out just to bring things into range. And here it is. There is, let's put some daylight on this so we can see what's going on. There is a man-made obstacle, 250 feet high. I can change the building footprint size. I'm going to say it's only 35 feet across. That's a bit more realistic. There we are. So there is our notional radio antenna on top of Mansonitis in Boulder. When can I get a moon shooting from here in town directly above the top of that obstacle? Let me show you very quickly how to do that. We covered this in a lot of detail a month and a half ago, and that webinar is up on the Vimeo site. So if you want to really delve into this building planning thing, check that video out. But here's what you would do. Moon, 2 years. I'm going to uncheck range. I'm going to say I want a tolerance of 1 degree. That's two moons width, half a degree. Remember, rule of thumb for the size of the moon. And I'm going to do use geodetics. And there it is. It's going to, there's the target. And I'm going to go search. And let's have a look, see what I got. This one looks good. April 19th. That will give me the moon directly above this notional antenna. And you can sort of see that looking back from the moon through the top of the tower to the red pin. So that's how you can plan cityscapes. It's how we could find out, for example, going back to Lindisfarne, when you would find the moon directly above the castle. You can often find these building heights online. So this was, I Googled for Lindisfarne Castle, high point, there it is, prominence, 35 meters to the tallest point. So you can use this tool here in the app, requires the subscription, but you can type in an elevation offset, building footprint size. In the sphere, you can get a little visual representation of the height of the building. And when you use visual search, if you set a building height, it will be included in the calculation for the results. So that's a very good way of planning moons next to buildings, on top of buildings, all that sort of thing. If you don't want, let's say we wanted it to appear, let's say this thing's 250 feet tall, but I want the moon to look 100 feet higher, I can actually say, well, I want it 350 feet above the ground here, 350, that, and then I search again, and you'll see our current date of April 19th. It's still there, but the time has changed. Or I can go through to 2024, and there you can see it's higher. So you can use, for building heights and target heights, you can plumb them in here in the target height field, and it'll calculate the altitude for you based on the view from the red pin to the grey pin, or you can set building heights there. That was a super fast overview of that, I know, but just to let you know that it's there. If you're interested in finding out more on that, let me show you where the webinar is on that. I just put this up this weekend, so it's a fairly new one. It's this one here, Planning for Cityscapes, Skylines and Buildings. And that goes through that. That's a full hour on this topic. Okay, let's see where else we got. Almost done. Fred asks, that would be the center of the moon. Hi, Fred. Correct. Yes, that would be the center of the moon because my disk alignment was set here to the center of the moon. If I wanted to get the bottom edge of wanted the moon sitting on top of the antenna, I would use this lower limb alignment. If I wanted it, let's say, hanging off the underside of a bridge, let's say there was a bridge that we knew the underside of it was 115 feet above the ground, you could put in 115 feet down here. You could say, tell me when the top edge of the moon is under the bridge. And that's what this disk alignment is for here. Otherwise, center of the moon. Ivan says, some browsers don't support 3D, even a pro subscription. So which are the most optimized for 3D? It can depend on the browser, and it can depend on the hardware. So if you have an older PC that doesn't support GPU, graphics processing unit, or has a limited GPU that doesn't have enough address space or memory or whatever it might be, that may be a problem. The app does try to detect that and warn you if it's not finding what it needs. Safari is, I don't know what they did last year, but the one upgrade, I think at 14, the 3D performance in Safari was horrible on Intel Macs. So Chrome tended to be a lot better for that. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, all tend to be fine. If you've got a current version, make sure your browser's kept up to date. Safari on the new Apple Macs is fine. That's what I'm running here this morning. It works really well. If you've got any problems, though, drop us a line at support. There are so many different versions of hardware out there. Sometimes it's hard to keep up with everything, but I'm always interested to see if anybody's having issues and see if there's anything we can do to fix them. So do let us know if that's the case. Loch asks, good question, what is the 5 foot beside your 250 foot? So Loch's asking about this number here. That is the default camera height above the ground. So it's assuming you have a tripod that's 5 foot high, or you're holding your camera at 5 foot above the ground. Whether it's 5 foot or 10 foot or 2 foot or 0, it hardly makes any difference except in the most high precision planning situations. And if you're shooting over, say in this example, a distance of 3 miles, makes barely any difference. If you're shooting, let's say you was, below the Washington Monument and you were shooting at an angle of 45 degrees up, it would make maybe a noticeable difference in something like that, because you're close to the subject, and 5 foot relative to an object that's a couple of 100 feet becomes maybe noticeable. But that's what it is. It's camera height above the ground. That's your question, Mark. I think we are almost done. Thanks so much everyone for joining. Sorry to have overrun so badly today, but hopefully it was worthwhile. I see there's a whole bunch of people still here. So thanks for sticking with it, and we'll get the recording out in a day or two's time and get that email to you, and hopefully you'll be able to join the next webinar. We'll look to run something next month. All the best. Thanks again. Bye-bye.